We've already been through looking at relaxing, retreating first of all, relaxing, and then retraining. That was our session today on the 4 right efforts and the hindrances. And so now we're looking at this concept of reconnection, all about other people and all about ill will and hatred, and how these things can overwhelm our mind at times and cause us a great deal of suffering in our lives. Because let's face it, the spiritual path, or life generally, would be very, very easy if it wasn't for other people. Just imagine if other people weren't getting in the way, things would be so easy, so wonderful. And I wonder, maybe a show of hands, is there anyone in this room who has a difficult person in their life? Challenging, yes? You already know who they are, don't you? Challenging person, yes, right, yes? Is there anyone in this room who is a problem person for other people? Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? If you were to get rid of that problem person, would life be good? If you could just get rid of them, disappear them, what would happen? Would all this ill will, would all this hatred disappear from your mind? No? More than likely, another one will just pop up. So we have to understand that this is a tendency of the mind, and in the Buddha's teaching, ill will is something that comes up in so many different forms. It's one of the hindrances that we looked at today. It's one of the unwholesome thoughts that we looked at previously. It's one of the anusayas, the underlying tendencies that we have as humans. Even babies have the underlying tendency towards ill will. It's one of the fetters that keeps us in a state of defilement. It's something that holds us back. There's so many different ways that ill will comes about on the Buddha's path, and in so many different forms. Because if we think about this mind of ill will, there's like a scale that happens. There's a scale, from mild irritation, mild annoyance, to large amounts of annoyance, to resentment, to hatred, anger, hostility, violence. All of this starts with the mind of ill will. It's one of those things that causes so many troubles for us, and yet we don't understand very well how it works. So what actually happens with this mind of ill will is that we have an object that we come into contact to, usually another human, sometimes a computer, whatever. And this object of aversion means we don't want to interact with it. We don't want it near us. We don't want it in our life. And what happens is that mind of attention keeps going to that object. We keep on giving this object of aversion attention. And this is called the ahara, the nutriment. This nutriment feeds the ill will. So the more we pay attention to it, the more angry we get. Classic case, someone I know. He's getting old now and living in suburbia, in the suburbs of Sydney. Any sounds just seem to reverberate for kilometres. So if there's a party like 4 kilometres away, he can hear it. And he keeps on paying attention to it. Oh, this party, this noise, this irritation develops. And then he keeps on paying attention to it. Resentment, annoyance builds in his mind. He keeps on paying attention to it. He gets angrier and angrier. I think he's actually walked around the neighbourhood before trying to find a party. I guess he'd probably call the police and shut the party down So this is kind of like this ill will. I mean, other people are just having a good time. And if he was just to ignore it, if he was to stop paying attention to it, his mind would be calm and peaceful. And it's the same for all of us when we encounter an object of ill will. There's a moment, perhaps, when we're able to decide whether we're going to go with it or not. But the moment we go into it, it starts to build. This irritation becomes annoyance, resentment, hatred, anger, and that's why it's called a hindrance. Because when the mind is subject to these hindrances, it's like the mind is swamped. It's like a tsunami of hatred, of ill will in our mind, and it's very difficult to get out of it. So as you know, I've been asking the internet for advice on Buddhist teachings by looking at memes. So there's lots of ways we can become annoyed with people. Contemporary society offers so many potential areas of disappointment, irritation, conflict. So this is a kind of like a mild irritation kind of thing. But the internet is so full of hate, so much to look at. And this is the kind of way we look at the world, really. You know, people annoy me. Wait, no. Things people do, this is what people say, it's not people, it's the things they do. But it's like, no, it's not, it's the people. But the problem is, as I suggested before, the people change. So starts to cast doubt upon our perceptions a little bit, because sometimes someone can annoy us a lot, but then at other times they don't annoy us. So maybe it is the things that they do. Maybe it's not the people. Maybe it's just us. We also know that problem people, those people that you've got in your mind, those difficult people, they have friends as well. So maybe they're not difficult to everyone. Even the most difficult people, even the worst dictators like Hitler, they have friends. He had friends. So is it something to do with our perception, maybe? Sometimes we can get very angry with people. This is the most innocuous that I could find on the internet. There's so many other good ones that weren't appropriate, unfortunately. So this anger, it kind of builds. You know, we start to lash out, and actually this is the problem with our hatred. Maybe we can't control it, and we end up lashing out at people or at things. But the problem for us is that it feels so good, doesn't it? It feels so good sometimes to hate on someone, to have a good beach session with some friends about someone we don't like. You know, it feels so good. We feel alive. You know what that is? It's the bubbling, that hot water we saw before in the image of ill will, bubbling inside of us, making us feel energized, making us feel invigorated with this energy or this hate bubbling inside our hearts. And so we think, yeah, this is something that, you know, we like, something that keeps us warm, something that we enjoy. But it's wrong, poor Grumpy the cat, it's wrong. Because, as Master Yoda tells us, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And you can feel this when you're hot and bubbling. You know, you feel exhausted afterwards. The Buddha gave a wonderful set of images under the heading, Things That Please Your Enemy. 7 things in the Anguttara Nikaya 7s, 7 things that will make your enemy happy. So if we do these things, we've lost. They're happy, we're not. Do you see where we're going with this? So the first one, and I love the way the Buddha appeals so sensibly to us. The first one is that we look ugly. When we've got hate in our heart, we look ugly. If you could see yourself when you're angry, when you're yelling at someone, you look like a toddler, red in the face, with this pure, malevolent hate on your face. You look like a monster. So ugly. And if this isn't a reason alone to get rid of hatred from our heart, I don't know what is. So the Buddha, first of all, appealing to our vanity, to our ego. Do you want to look ugly? The second thing that will please our enemies is that we can't sleep. So you probably experience this when you get upset with someone, when you have a conflict in your life. You go to bed that night and the mind is just churning away. I'll show him. I'll let her know how I really think. How dare she do this? Next time I see her, this is what I'll say to her. And we go on, and we're buzzing. It's that boiling water in us, kind of that energy. It means we can't sleep. And the worst thing, of course, is if you don't get a good night's sleep, you don't get your beauty sleep, so therefore you look even uglier. So this is the second thing that will please our enemies. The third thing is that we don't profit. So nothing good comes of our anger. Nothing good. We don't benefit in any way. So a good example might be when my friend couldn't work his phone and threw it against the wall. Angry, and of course he didn't profit from that. Not only could he not use the phone, he lost his phone and he had to spend more money to buy a new one. So we don't profit from our anger. And you can see this also just in our relationships. When we're angry, we don't have good relationships. They're not beneficial. We don't enjoy them. We can't profit from good interactions with people. If you're a salesperson going into a room and you're full of anger, resentment, hatred, I don't think people are going to buy your goods. You're not going to profit. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing that pleases our enemy is that we lose wealth. And a good way to think about this could be something like, is it Nick Kyrgios? I don't know how to say his name. I've only ever read it. Or Bernard Tomic, tennis players. So when they get angry, they throw their rackets around, they cuss the judges, they don't not only do they not profit, but they lose wealth. And this is the fourth thing, they lose wealth. Or I remember reading about a road rage incident where this driver decided to run down a bicyclist who fortunately wasn't injured, but he had to pay a huge fine, and he also damaged his car. So he didn't profit and he lost wealth. And even in the time of the Buddha, if you kind of went and did something terrible, like you broke someone's property or you hit someone or damaged something, then you had to pay the king. You had to go and give your money to the king as like a punishment. So even in those times, you didn't profit and you lost wealth. The fifth thing is that we develop a bad reputation. So that's true too. When people are angry or full of hatred, we always hear about it, don't we? And so we lose a good reputation. People speak of us saying, oh, that person's always so angry, that person's always so full of hate. And of course, the next thing is that when we are full of anger and hate, people don't want to be around us. So we lose our reputation and we lose our friends. We lose our family. No one wants to be around a person who's angry. And you feel this, you see this in your own life when you come into contact with people who are hostile, people who are angry. You just take a step back, you're like, whoa, keep away. And so it just goes to show, we'll lose our friends if we're angry. We'll get a bad reputation. And the last thing is that we will always experience bad results. And it's true. If you get angry, the guy who hit and ran with the bicyclist who crashed his car, he experienced bad results. He went to prison. When he was in prison, he wasn't working, he lost wealth, he had to pay a fine, he didn't profit, he got a bad reputation. I read about him in the newspaper, and I expect that, people around him really questioned being friends with this person. Who wants to be friends with someone who could mow you down at any moment? And I expect that as a result of this, he had poor sleep, and I imagine that in the moment when he was going for that cyclist, he looked ugly. So these are the things, the Buddha said, that would please our enemies. So these are the drawbacks of anger. These are the drawbacks of hatred in our heart. So we need to have some strategies to deal with anger when it arises, and some strategies to deal with it in the long term. When we encounter someone who is difficult, maybe they've got bad actions that they do, maybe they annoy us with their bodies somehow, like they might steal, or they might hit someone, or they might just annoy us, but they have okay speech, they've got nice speech. But this person is like a dirty rag. So you see my robes here, we've got these patches on these robes. In the days of the Buddha, the monks used to wear patched robes. They used to walk around, and if they were to see a good-looking rag on the road, they think, hang on a second, I might need that rag. And so they'd spread this rag out, and they'd look and they'd see, okay, this part is dirty, but this part is clean. In the same way, when we look at someone who has bad bodily behaviour, but their speech is okay, when we see their bad bodily behaviour, it's like seeing the dirt on the rag. So what do? What does a rag-wearing monk do? They tear off the bad part and throw it away, and they keep the good part. Stop paying attention to the bad qualities, focus on the good qualities. So the first time you hear this, you think, oh, that's very beautiful. It is very beautiful. And you think, but then you think, is this just denial? Are we just deluding ourselves further? And the answer is no, because what we're doing is not trying to blind ourselves to people's bad qualities. We know their bad qualities. They're manifest right in front of us. But if we're going to have a good interaction with them, what we need to do is to balance our mind. So most of the time when we've got problem people, difficult people in our life, that's the only way that we can see them. But we know that other people see them differently. We know that at certain times, even we see them differently. And so it's important, if we want to remove hate from our heart, hate from our mind, that we balance these problem people's problems and see their positive sides, just like a dirty rag. So next time you come into contact with that person, see if you can spot some good qualities. The second type of person we're likely to encounter is someone whose speech is bad, the speech annoys us, but perhaps they've got good qualities in their bodily behaviour. So the person like this, it's quite easy actually, isn't it, to get bothered by people's verbal behaviour. They say something that annoys us. Maybe it's a slightly veiled insult, or maybe it's a criticism or something that annoys us, and we become hot and bothered. We start bubbling with that anger again. And so when you're hot, when you're bothered, what you want to do is to cool down. It's like if there's an angry person who's hot and bothered, they want to cool down, they want a drink of water, and so they come along to this pond, but the problem is the pond is covered in slime, in algae, in water plants. So this is like the bad qualities of speech that we see in these people. So what do? We brush aside those bad qualities, brush aside the algae, and drink so that we can become cool, so that we can slay our thirst. It's not that we're saying these qualities cease to exist, but we need to have that coolness. We push aside those bad qualities and we drink in what good qualities we can see. In the same way, the third type of person we're likely to encounter is someone who has bad bodily behavior, bad verbal behavior, but from time to time they have this placidity, maybe they have some openness in their heart, and we can see that. This is like water that has gathered in the hoof print of an animal. So here we have an animal's hoof print, and there's a bit of water left in it. And we are hot, we are thirsty, we want to drink some water. And so, how do we get the water out of this hoof print? If we try to scoop it up with our hand, we're likely to mix it up with all the mud. So what we need to do, and this is showing just how far we need to go, we get down on our hands and knees and we suck that water up, just like an animal does. We suck up the good qualities of that person. We put aside those bad qualities, we get down there and we suck up these good qualities so that our minds don't have that hatred. Our minds don't have that aversion, that resentment, that ill will, so that we can cool ourselves. Probably you've got people like this in your life, yes? People who have some small good qualities that we can suck up somehow if we pay careful attention. The fourth kind of person that we're going to encounter in our life doesn't have any good redeeming qualities whatsoever. So they have bad bodily behavior, bad verbal behavior, and they don't have that placidity of mind, they don't have that opening of the heart. They're just bad from start to finish. So there's a little shift here in the way that we have to deal with these people. So previously we developed some metta. For those last three people, it was kindness that we were looking for. We were trying to find their good qualities. They had something that we could latch onto and make use of. But with someone like this, there's no good qualities that we can see at that particular moment. Might change, but there's no qualities that we can see at that moment. And so instead of having kindness, what we need to have is compassion. And so compassion is just this letting go of any vested interest in their well-being and just wishing them peace, wishing them safety, wishing them good luck in their life. Not getting too involved, just developing a mind that says, okay, good luck, peace be with you. And this person is like a traveller in the desert who's sick, who's injured, who's walking a long way, they need medicine, they need help. And so you think, may they find peace, may they find the medicine they need, may they find safety, may they be well. And this is the way that we can remove resentment, remove hate from our heart for this kind of person who has many bad qualities. It's not easy to take the hate out of our hearts. Sometimes when you hear these kind of teachings, at first you might think, yes, it's wonderful, but then when you think about it, you're like, hang on a second, he hurt me, they really upset me. Or perhaps you have some really toxic, negative relationships in your life, maybe a history of abuse or violence. So for those kind of people, these methods may not be appropriate for you, or these methods might be something that you apply at a certain time. Perhaps if you've had a bad interaction recently, you might not be able to apply these methods. But later on, perhaps you'll have some space in your heart. And we do this, again, not for their benefit, although it will help your relationship with them, but for your own benefit, so that your mind does not become overwhelmed with hate, with anger, with resentment. And it's so easy to have these kind of mind states, even towards good people, even towards friends, even towards teachers. The Buddha himself, people didn't always like him. People said bad things about him. They had bad attitudes towards him. They complained. They didn't have respect towards him at all times. And so we know that even the good people in our life can sometimes irritate us. The good people in our life can sometimes annoy us, even if they have really good qualities. They have good qualities in their body, in their speech, and in their mind. We can still become upset with them. So with a person like this, and this is the fifth person, think of this person like a cool forest pool. So again, we're hot, we're thirsty, we want to cool down. And so with this kind of person, we plunge into this beautiful, cool pool, and we bathe, we relax, we enjoy. And when we get out, we lie down in the shade and we relax. So this is a simile for enjoying the good qualities that this person has, basking in their good qualities. And this is a way that we can remove resentment, remove anger from our hearts, and focus on these beautiful things that are going to give us a different state of mind, some comfort, some pleasure, some joy about the behavior of people who are positive and beneficial in our life, so that we don't have that resentment, so that we don't have that anger. So these are some methods. This is called the Dutiyaāghātapaṭivinaya Sutta. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya 5, and it's called Overcoming Resentment. And it's one of my favourite suttas. I think it's very beautiful. So this is what we're doing here. This is the space sloth. And he's saying, we seek to understand their suffering. So when someone is rude and hateful towards us, and we're in a good place, it just rolls right off. It doesn't affect us. This is the aim. This is the ideal. And sometimes you need to be in a good place to be able to do this. You need to be feeling strong, stable, and you need to be in the right frame of mind. But other times, this could be very difficult. So that's one strategy that we can do, that shifting of perception. Another strategy the Buddha talked about is kind of like an optimistic strategy, using things could be worse kind of approach. And this is the story of the Venerable Puṇṇa. So Puṇṇa was a monk at the time of the Buddha, and he was going off to live in a faraway land which was very dangerous. And the people in that land were renowned to be very violent, very cruel. And so the Buddha's a bit worried about this monk going off to live in this savage place. And so he says to Puṇṇa, what are you going to do if the people in that place verbally abuse you? And Puṇṇa says, he's an optimist, he says, I'll be very happy that they abuse me. I'll be very happy. I'll think, these are good people. These are good people. And I'll be just very happy that they're not throwing clods of earth at me instead. And the Buddha's like, well, what if they do throw clods of earth at you? Well, I'll just be very happy they're not roughing me up with their hands. Well, what if they do rough you up with their hands? Oh, I'll just be very happy that they're not throwing things at me. Well, what if they do throw things at you? Oh, well then I'll be very happy that they're not throwing sharp things at me. What if they do throw sharp things at you? Well, I'll be very glad that they're not sticking me with weapons. What if they do stick you with weapons? Oh, these are good people. I'll be very glad that they're not killing me. What if they do kill you? Oh, well, then I'll be very glad. Some people, they want to die and they have to go and find an assassin. But here I am, an assassin comes to me. So this is maybe not a recommended kind of strategy. I don't think this is meant for us to be like, just allow people to throw clods of earth at you. I think what this story is about is just kind of going, okay, things could be worse. I know, sure, they were playing horrible dance music in the neighborhood. At least they weren't playing Justin Bieber. Or if they were playing Justin Bieber at 12 a.m., at least they weren't playing Metallica at 3 a.m. So you see how we can kind of play with our mind a little bit, changing the way we look at the situation. Things could always be worse. And that's something that can give us a little bit of comfort in a bizarre kind of way. So that's another strategy. One more strategy the Buddha gives us when we're dealing with difficult things is to lower our expectations. People are going to disappoint us. People are annoying, difficult, strange. They make us uncomfortable. This is what people do. This is the nature of people. And the story that goes along with this strategy is from the Dhammika Sutta. It's a story about a tree deva, a tree spirit. And this tree spirit has the most wonderful fruit, giant figs in the tree. And one day, a person comes along and they see these giant figs and they think, oh, I might have a giant fig. And so they climb the tree and they eat their fill of figs. They fill their bag up. And as they climb back down the tree, they break off a branch. And then the tree deva, the tree spirit, comes back and is so upset. So upset. Someone has stolen the fruit and ruined the tree. And so the tree deva says, right, that's it. No more fruit for you, like the soup Nazi from Seinfeld. No more fruit for you. And so what happens is the king and all the subjects of the kingdom are like, what's going on? Where's the fruit? And so they go to the king of the gods, Sakka, and they say, hey, look, tree deva has stopped providing us with figs. Can you sort it out? And the king of the gods is really upset and he looks down and he sees why this has happened. And so what he does is he sends a huge hurricane, a huge wind, and it destroys the tree. So you can imagine if the tree spirit was upset before, now the tree spirit is distraught, positively distraught. And so the king of the gods, Sakka, he comes down and he says to the tree deva, what's happened? What's happened? I've just destroyed your tree. And the tree deva says, well, this person broke my branches and stole the fruit. And he's like, the king of the gods says, when this happened, were you practicing the Dharma of trees? And this means, do you understand what it means for a tree to exist in this world? He says, the leaf cutters come and they cut the leaves. The bark cutters come and they take off the bark. Fruit pickers come and they pick the fruit. Branch collectors come, they collect the branches. And this is what it means to be a tree. This is the Dharma of trees. So what Sakka the gods is saying, what else do you expect? People will come along and they'll take the leaves, they'll take the bark, they'll take the fruit, they'll take the branches. This is what it means to be a tree. In the same way, this is what it means to be a human. people will come along and they'll annoy us. They'll irritate us. They'll destroy our happiness if we let them. So we need to understand this is just what humans do. And so in this way, we don't take it too personally. We don't take it to heart. This is just someone who's trying to take away our leaves, trying to take away our peace. Let them have it. Let them take it away. This is lowering our expectations. So another method that we can overcome resentment, overcome hatred, is to apply some antidotes to our hate. So most of you know that a common antidote for ill will is metta, loving kindness. This is one of the 4 immeasurables, 4 Brahmaviharis that the Buddha taught, that existed even in the time before the Buddha. So this is a mind state that is limitless, it's immeasurable, it's vast. And if we have this mind state, it can completely wash away all of the anger, all of the resentment, all of the irritation. The problem is, if we still have resentment in our heart, then the metta, the loving kindness, will not be pure. Which is why the Buddha taught these methods of overcoming the resentment. Because if there's still resentment, then it's not 100% loving kindness towards the whole universe. And this is a common problem for Buddhists, a common problem for meditators who practice metta. So we say, and I've had people come up to me and talk about how they practice loving kindness, and they send out loving kindness to the universe, to everybody, except him. There's still some resentment towards that person. So that means that that metta, that loving kindness, is not pure. And the Buddha said about this kind of person who has some resentment still in their heart, he said, no, this is not the practice of metta. This is not what it means to practice metta. Loving kindness is the complete absence of hatred. So that might be an antidote, but it might be a strong ideal for us to develop a mind like that. So we need to be aware of this lingering tendency of resentment and ill will to exist in the mind. I don't think it means we can't try to practice metta, that we can't try to give loving kindness to the entire universe. I think it means we have to be realistic about what we're doing and not kind of bypass these resentment, this hatred in our heart, not delude ourselves that we're some enlightened beings projecting love out into the universe when we've still got these problem relationships. Because actually that's where we need to apply our effort. That's where we need to apply our diligence in removing that resentment first, because this is the way that we prevent more from arising in our heart. So this is the right efforts that we were talking about before. So you might apply metta, you might apply compassion. This is the second antidote the Buddha talks about. And if you know your 4 Brahmaviharis, you might expect the next one to be sympathetic joy, yeah, so mudita it's called. But no, in this list of antidotes to resentment the Buddha provides us, we don't go down that third path of sympathetic joy. And the reason why is probably when we don't like someone very much. It's very hard to enjoy their happiness. So it's very hard for us to rejoice in their good fortune. If someone you don't like in the office gets that promotion, you're like, yay. If someone you don't like wins the lotto, you're like, oh. It's very hard to enjoy their good fortune. So we don't use that in this list. Instead, what the Buddha says to do is develop this equanimity. Just looking on, very even-mindedness. We don't kind of love them, we don't hate them, we just try to stick in the middle on this razor edge, just like, okay, I'm not going to fall into this trap of giving them love, because I can't, but I'm not going to fall into this trap of giving them hatred, because that's bad for me. So just even-mindedness, very, the word equanimous, very equal in the way that you look. And the fourth thing the Buddha says to do in this little list for overcoming resentment, applying these antidotes, is very sensible. Just ignore them. And this is actually a pretty good strategy too, because it means that you're not going to get caught up in, you're not going to have an interaction which produces more negativity in your mind and which could at any moment spill over into hatred, violence, or whatever. I'll just tell another couple of stories to finish up this topic. And it's the story of what happens when our anger arises. And it's the story of what happens when we don't watch the mind with those 4 right efforts, when we don't make this effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising, to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen, and then develop new wholesome states and maintain those wholesome states. So it's very, very easy when life is going well, when people are treating us well, to have wholesome minds towards people, to have a wholesome heart, to have good vibes towards that person. But when they become difficult, what happens? And this is the story of my favourite character from the Suttas, Kali, a maid servant, and her mistress, Videhika. So Kali has this mistress, and this mistress has a good reputation for being kind, for being generous, for not being harsh. But Kali the maid, she's a bit of a troublemaker, and she thinks to herself, hang on a second, does my mistress Videhika, does she only have this reputation because I am good at my job? Because I do my work well? She doesn't have to hate me, she doesn't have to have a problem with me, because I'm doing the work of being a good person. So she thinks, I wonder if there is any hatred in my mistress Videhika. Let me test her a little bit. And so the next morning, Kali the maid doesn't get up for work. And the mistress Videhika's like, Kali, what's going on? Why aren't you up? No reason. And the mistress is like, and Kali thinks, ooh, I think I saw some irritation in my mistress. Why don't I test her a little bit further? And so the next day, Kali doesn't get up. And of course the mistress is like, Kali, what's going on? And she's like, nothing. And this time the mistress gets a flash of anger across her face. And so Kali thinks, ooh, unarisen anger almost came out. Why don't I test her a little bit more? And so the next morning she doesn't get up, the mistress is angry, and she says bad words to Kali. And Kali's like, ooh, there is anger in her. It's not just that I do a good job to make her happy that she doesn't get angry. She hasn't removed anger from her heart. Why don't I test her a little bit further then? And so the next morning she doesn't get up, mistress gets angry, she yells, and she hits Kali across the head with a rolling pin. And so finally Kali is satisfied that the anger in her mistress has finally come out. The anger that she knew was there has come out, has surfaced. And so she goes out into the streets, bleeding from her wound, and she says, see what she's done, my mistress, this woman of good reputation, this gentle Videhika, look at what she's done to me. And so you see the truth there about what pleases our enemies. Bad reputation for Dhammika. The whole village now knows about her anger. The whole village knows that she beat Kali, so she loses her good reputation. The reason this anger arose in her was because Kali became annoying. When Kali was lovely and easygoing, when she did her job, it was really easy for Dhammika to be all peaceful. And this is something for us to learn about on the spiritual path. It's really easy when everything is going your way, when the people around you are nice and lovely, it's really easy to be very spiritual, to have a heart full of metta, to look at these people with eyes of love and compassion. But when they become difficult, that's when we're tested. That's when our spiritualness is tested. And that's where we really need to apply our efforts so that we really, truly can take out this anger, this resentment from our heart. So in a way, when we have to deal with these difficult people in our life, it's a kind of blessing, because it shows us that actually we still have some work to do. And it tests us. Can we, in the face of difficult people, remain calm? Can we maintain a mind that is free from the defilement of hate, anger, ill will? And so, to finish off, some similes that the Buddha uses. He says, we need to develop a mind that is vast. Just like those minds of metta, loving kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, even-mindedness, equanimity, upekkha. We need to develop these kinds of minds if we really want to have a heart free of ill will. And the images that he uses are quite good. He says, if someone was to come along with a shovel and go to a mound of earth and say, I am going to make this earth not exist. I will make this earth not earth, and starts shoveling away. He wants to get rid of all of the earth on earth. But the problem is, the earth is vast. It's very difficult with a shovel to remove all the dirt from the world. So in the same way, when our mind is vast and purified with these beautiful mind states, it's very difficult when someone comes along with a shovel when someone comes along with some anger, for it to affect our mind. They can just keep shoveling away, keep digging away with their irritation, with their irritable ways, with their annoyances. And if we have a vast mind, a mind that's really open and wide, it won't affect us. They can't pick away at our peace of mind. They can't pick away at our love, our kindness, an ideal, perhaps. The second image the Buddha uses is the image of someone trying to draw, to paint, in the air. So I don't know if you've tried this yourself. Try to paint in air. Doesn't work. Why? There's nothing for it to stick to. In the same way, if we can become Teflon, things just slide right off us. It can't stick to us. Who wants it to stick to you, this anger, this ill will? Why would you want that to stick to you? So you just let it slide right off. This is the second method the Buddha talks about. The third is to imagine that someone is coming with a grass torch and they want to set fire to the river Ganges. So of course, the river Ganges is very wet and it's not very easy to set fire to the Ganges River. Another image the Buddha uses is, and this is the image which is the title of the sutta that I'm drawing these similes from, is the image of the saw. So this sutta is called the Simile of the saw. And in this image it says, if someone comes at you with verbal abuse, bad words, they call you names, then even if they were to take a saw and hack off every limb, you would not give rise to anger. You would not give rise to hate. And again, this is one of those images where you think, wow, this is pretty special. Okay, right, people coming at me with anger, just hack off my arms, hack off my legs. I'm okay, I love you. And the Buddha does say this is not meant to be taken literally. So when they come for you, when the zombies come, or whoever comes, you don't just give yourself up and say, take my limbs. No, this is a way for us to consider. This is a way for us to think. And he says this is specifically only about verbal abuse. So he says at the end of the sutta, so if you can imagine this simile, then there's nothing that you could not endure of bad speech that comes your way. And so these are some powerful ways that we can try to develop the mind. These are pretty ideal ways. It might take us some time to get to a state where we become vast, like the earth, or we become Teflon, or we become so wide and wet that when people try to set the fire of anger alight in us, it doesn't hold any sway. Or if people come with bad words and annoy us, that we don't react. These are pretty high ideals, but they're what the Buddha says that we can work towards in our life if we want to remove anger and resentment from our heart. And the last image I'll leave you with is 3 similes the Buddha used to talk about anger. And he says there are 3 types of people in the world that can be compared to an inscription. The first person, when they have anger, is like an inscription drawn in rock, carved in rock. So this person, when they have anger in their mind, keeps it there for a long time, doesn't let go easily of this anger. Carved into a rock, lasts thousands of years in your heart. The second person is like a line drawn in sand. So this line will eventually be washed away by the waves, or the wind will eventually blow the sand and the line will vanish. This is like the middling kind of anger, holding on to it for a middling amount of time. But the best type of person, the Buddha says, in regards to anger, is the inscription drawn in the water. As soon as you draw it in the water, it vanishes. And this is how the Buddha tells us to practice. And again, it's an ideal. Sometimes it might be very difficult. But sometimes, if you practice in this way, you might find that it can also be easy. And so, Space Cat, obviously spent far too long on the internet looking for memes. Space Cat says, when someone is rude to you and it has no effects, this is what you're like. You're like out there in vast space, cool, you've got your sunnies on, just floating away. And this is the animal I'll leave you with as a kind of mascot for your anger. So I offer this as a reflection for you tonight. We're going to have